a bronze case, a sapphire crystal, a 4 hertz movement, all for $200. Sounds too good to be true. Now the question is, can all of these amazing specifications compensate for the fact that this watch has no historical significance, even though the watch it's homaging is very historically significant? It has a 39mm diameter, a 12mm thickness, a 48.5mm lug to lug, and I'll get to the huge caveat with the wearing experience a little bit later in this video. There are 3 major gripes I have with this watch that I wish Tandorio would change, because I do think that this watch has a lot of potential. So full disclosure, I was browsing online looking for a bronze watch, and I came across this because I don't own a bronze watch, nor have I owned a watch with a 4 hertz movement. So I reached out to Tandorio to ask them if they could send over this watch for review, and they said yes. So I don't have to send this back, I get to keep this, but as always, they have no input on the content of this video, so my thoughts are completely my own. This watch is homaging the Longines Heritage military watch. That specific watch is quite contentious because it's an homage of one of their other watches in their archives.
This watch is historically significant because it's a 1940s pilot's watch provided by the Royal Air Force.
One of the major design flaws is that the second hand doesn't reach the chapter ring of this watch, and I think it looks a little bit strange when you're looking at the watch itself. Another thing that you should keep in mind with this design is that when you're looking online, most of the photos will make the handset appear black. In this video, I also couldn't capture the blue of the hands because in certain lighting scenarios it looks black, but in direct sunlight it looks blue. The dial is actually quite interesting. That's one of the reasons I was drawn to this watch. Some of you may not be a big fan of a faux patina dial. There's a whole kerfuffle with the Longines Heritage military having a faux patina dial, and some people don't like it, some people do like it. Personally, I like it. It kind of reminds me of tiramisu. It's the color and the specs. Because it's made of copper, I think it started oxidizing almost immediately after I took it out of the box. When I started touching it with my fingers, and my fingers have oils in them, it starts to leave a mark on the watch. It hasn't fully oxidized yet, of course. Some of you may be a fan of that. Some of you may not be a fan of the bronze casing. If you're not, then I would check out the stainless steel version of this watch. There is no polishing on the watch case itself. It's all brushed bronze. I do think that works well with the general aesthetic of this watch. Okay, one thing you may have noticed, this watch is on a blue NATO, and the reason it's on a blue NATO is because I am not a big fan of this leather strap. This leather strap is nothing special. It doesn't seem like actual leather, and that's to be expected. Another reason that I'm deterred from wearing this is because the leather strap doesn't have enough holes to fit my itty bitty wrist, so I had to switch it on to a NATO strap. But I'm pretty sure if you have larger wrists, this might fit a little bit better. The clasp of this leather strap is made out of stainless steel, and the case is made out of bronze. It just doesn't look as good as it could be if it was made out of bronze. It's just a cost-cutting measure because these are all pre-made watch straps. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave it a like, try to comment down below. I am always trying to respond to everyone's comments, and I will try to remain diligent with that. Also, if you want to subscribe, I would heavily recommend that as well. So let's get on to the pros of this watch. And one definite pro has to be the movement of this watch. Now this has a PT 5000 movement, also known as a Precision Time 5000 movement because it's manufactured by Precision Time. And it's based off a Swiss Excalibur whose patent had expired, so Precision Time swooped in and basically made a legal copy of the Swiss movement. It is kind of a gray area because they did copy it, and some people may not be a fan of that. Some people may be a fan of that. I'm just trying to state the fact. Again, ideally, I wish that they hadn't done that.
But to characterize the opposing argument, it's basically that it's free game since the ETA 2824's patent had already expired.
when you look at the dial itself, you're not going to immediately notice how much smoother it is, but when you go back to a 3 hertz watch, you can immediately tell. And the way that I would analogize this is if you have a 120 hertz refresh rate on your phone and you take a look at a 60 hertz phone, you'll easily be able to tell, but it's not as noticeable when you move from 60 to 120. It started oxidizing quickly. My assumption is that someone who purchases a bronze watch wants this watch to patinate. I really am a big fan of this design. There is a caveat with that, of course, that kind of accumulates into one of my 3 gripes, which is that it is an homage, because they really did copy and paste the Longines heritage military design. However, I do want to mention something here, and it's that a lot of these homage watches on AliExpress, homage watches that are already well known, and they copy designs that they know are going to make a lot of money. So it's interesting that they did copy a design that's not that popular. So I think the intentionality behind the copying of design is slightly different than copying a Submariner, but still doesn't excuse the fact that they basically copied and pasted a design. I do wish that they did change up a little bit more of this watch, because I do think that, especially with this bronze case, that they're on the cusp of almost creating something inspired and not homage. If you look at other companies such as Christopher Ward, they have very, very clearly inspired watches, but they just add a few twists on certain designs to the point that basically they can claim it as their own. And I really wish that Tandorio just changed up something about this watch so that they could do the same, because I really do believe that they're so close. They were so close with this watch. One of the major cons about this watch is the wearing experience. So this is a 39mm watch, but one thing to keep in mind is that it's a pilot's watch. There is no bezel. So the actual dial size is huge compared to the average 39mm diver watch, because the diver has a bezel and the dial naturally has to be smaller, but this has no bezel, so it is huge. If you're used to wearing a 40mm diver watch, and that's your conception of what how a 40mm watch should wear. Relative to that, I think that this would wear similar to a 42mm diver watch, so it is not going to fit all wrists. It's not just the dial size, however, that affects the wearing experience, it's also the lugs. Most watches have lugs that conform to your wrist. You can kind of see an effort here to conform this watch to your wrist. They could have curved it down a little bit more so that this would be more of an accessible wear for the majority of wrists. The lugs on this watch in particular overhang on my wrist. That's why I think I have to wear it on a NATO. A lot of people talk about wrist sizes and they just give you one dimension, which is your wrist diameter, but it is a lot more nuanced than that, because I find that watches that have really long lugs tend to fit people's wrists better if they have wider wrists. So you can have a really thick wrist, but I don't think that it would look that good. If you have a wide wrist, then perhaps this watch may suit your wrist a little bit better. So another gripe that I have with this watch, which accumulates into the 3 big gripes, which is, first of all, the wearing dimensions, the handset, and the fact that it doesn't reach the chapter ring. And this is the third gripe I have with this watch, which is this leather band. Now, I already mentioned it before in the design. However, I do want to kind of hone in on this idea here. Not only do I not enjoy it because it doesn't fit my wrist, because that would be unfair just to say, oh, this watch is rubbish because it doesn't fit my wrist. No. I think that this leather band pair with the watch case doesn't work as well as it does with the steel case, because it kind of looks a little bit monochrome, because everything is just the same sort of color. The dial is the same sort of color as the case, and then now your strap is the same sort of color as the case, and everything just kind of blends. My skin color is kind of similar to this strap color, and personally I think they should just put it on a blue, green, or gray NATO because it just adds that little bit of contrast that I do think that this watch needs to push it beyond its boring and one tones type design. Let's discuss the elephant in the room, the lack of historicity in this Tandorio. Even though Tandorio homaging Longines' heritage military watch isn't the same as Longines pulling from their archives and making an inspired watch based off their 1940s pilot watch design, one thing that they do share is the fact that both of these watches don't have any inherent historical significance to these watches specifically. So the way I see it is that if Longines can create an homage of their past watch and have no historical ties to their current model, I believe so can Tandorio. So here are some of the prerequisites I think you need to have when you're purchasing this watch. First of all, you need to have a wide wrist unless you plan on putting this on a NATO, just because of the fact that this watch doesn't conform to your wrist. Another thing you need to do with this watch is you need to like bronze as a material unless you're going for the steel version of this watch. Also, you need to be okay with the military style design because my brain is a little bit simplistic. I didn't think I was the type of person to think, ooh, shiny heavy equals good quality. But those two characteristics of a watch do have an impact on the way I perceive its value. I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't, because it does. Another thing you need to do is be okay with the fact that this watch is clearly inspired by the Longines heritage military watch. With all of those things in mind, I do think that this watch is a great buy. If you look at the fact that it has amazing specifications, if you're okay with all those things, I would definitely recommend checking this out. I'll have a link in my description. I don't get paid for that. It's just a link from Tandorio. And if you want to check out some photos of my watches online and you want to answer some polls, I would definitely recommend checking out my Instagram and my Watch Crunch account. If you're interested in other watch reviews, I have a ton of other watch reviews and watch commentary that you can check out over here. So with all that in mind, I want to thank you so much for watching this video. I really, really do appreciate it. I'm really enjoying this watch community and I really enjoy making these videos. So I just want to thank you for that. I hope that this channel patinates just like your favorite watch. I'll see you in another episode of Time Taker.